Hey, this is Drew Page. Welcome to the Drew Page channel. In this video, we are going to talk about Elon Musk's agreement to purchase Twitter and what the ramifications are that we can take away to learn about acquiring a business. So, news broke that Elon Musk has bought Twitter. There have been several news outlets that released the story that there was an agreement for Elon to purchase Twitter for $44 billion and to take Twitter private. Now, a lot of people have already assumed that Elon is now the new owner of Twitter. There's been a couple of people on Twitter who've actually closed out their accounts. They've deleted their accounts and are no longer participating. And then there's some people that have jumped back onto Twitter that have been away from it for a while on the assumption that Elon has taken it back over. One thing to keep in mind is that Elon has not yet bought Twitter. Twitter is still its own company. Elon Musk has entered into an agreement to acquire Twitter, but it has not actually yet been done. So we're going to talk about that and what this might mean for you if you want to purchase a business in the future if you've never bought a business before. So if you find this helpful, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell. And with that, let's get started. Yesterday, there was a news story that broke out that there was a filing showing that there was a termination fee and other things based on an agreement to purchase that had been filed with the SEC. So I actually went to the SEC website and didn't just look at the filing like most news outlets did. I actually printed out the entire merger agreement and I've read all of the pages. The agreement is 75 pages long when you include the signature page. And then there's also a Schedule A attachment as an exhibit. I've read everything that's in this document, and I wanted to point out to you some different things that in the event you want to start a business at some point, you may want to know about. So think of buying a business kind of like buying a home or buying your first house or buying a rental property. When you see a home that you want, you send a contract through a realtor or on a sale by owner, however you want to do it, but you send a contract. And the two parties make an agreement. Normally in that agreement, there are certain stipulations. But when both parties sign the agreement, the house still is not the one who is trying to buy it. It's still the one, it still belongs to the seller. There's a closing date that's set, and there's an in-between time where things happen before the actual purchase of the home is secured. Lots of times in contracts for rental homes and even for your own homes, you have inspections, you have financing contingencies, you have appraisal contingencies, all these different types of things and these conditions that have to be met in order for it to reach the closing date. And the closing date is when the sale actually is confirmed and completed. This is the same when you're purchasing a business. It's not like when you go into the gas station and you buy a Milky Way candy bar or something. I'm not getting a sponsorship by them. That's just my favorite candy bar. But you pay to get a Milky Way and you give the money and then they give you the Milky Way and the same day the transaction is concluded. That's not how this works. So the fact that there was a signed agreement between Elon Musk and his parent companies and Twitter does not mean that he has bought it. It is a pending sale. It is a sale that has not yet closed, and there is a closing date that's anticipated, but we'll talk about that as we get into the agreement. But I want you to keep that in mind because you've got all these people jumping in and out of Twitter based on the fact that Elon Musk owns Twitter, but he doesn't own Twitter yet. He's probably going to, but we'll look at why that is here in just a moment. So let's go through some of the terms of the contract to see if we can figure things out. So under the terms of the contract, the agreement and plan of merger was entered on April 25th, 2022 between Twitter, which is called the company in the contract, the parent company, which is one of the companies owned by Elon Musk, which is called X Holdings 1, and then there's another company called the Acquisition Sub, which is a subsidiary of the parent company, which is called X Holdings 2. And then there's also the equity investor, which is Elon Musk, who is also going to be a guarantor of this. So this is an agreement to acquire the company by way of a merger. Now, there's a couple different ways to get a business. One is you can just buy the business. It can just be an acquisition where you are buying it and just it's going to keep operating with the same board, the same executives. It's just going to be its own separate entity. And then there's a merger where two companies combine in together, and you mesh the two companies together. And so some aspects of this company may remain, some aspects of this company may remain, and then they'll eliminate certain things. But it's joining the company together. That's a merger. Whereas an acquisition is you're just buying the business, but the business is going to remain the entity that it is. There's also asset sales where companies just essentially sell off their assets and other things, but that's a little bit different. That's not really a business purchase. That's a purchase of assets. But in this agreement, it's an agreement for a merger, and they are going to be merging the acquisition sub, which is X Holdings 2, with the company, which is Twitter. On page 2 of the agreement, it says Elon Musk is the guarantor and has entered into a limited guarantee guaranteeing certain of parents and acquisition subs obligations. So in other words, Elon Musk is a third-party guarantor to the businesses that he owns, that he will make sure that the financing goes through. The next several pages consist of definitions, and they end on page 12. And ordinarily, the definitions page is just, it really isn't all that exciting to read. But in this circumstance, there is one definition that's going to come up later on into the agreement that we're going to take special note of. On page 12, it says termination fee shall mean an amount equal to $1 billion. So that's a specific number. There are some other cool definitions in here. They define Tesla shares and all that, so we know that Tesla shares are going to be involved in some way. But the termination fee definition is going to be very important for why it's likely that Elon Musk is going to be able to complete the transaction. Now, for those who own Twitter stock, the question is, what happens to your stock? And that is answered on page 14. It says, except as otherwise provided in this agreement, each share of company common stock issued and outstanding immediately prior to the effective time shall be converted into the right to receive $54.20 per share of company common stock in cash without interest. Each share of company common stock to be converted into the right to receive the merger consideration shall no longer be issued or outstanding and shall be automatically canceled and shall cease to exist. So it's basically a take it or leave it. You're going to get $54.20 for your share. You are not going to be able to transfer your shares over into Elon's company. He is buying them all. They are all his. And if you're a Twitter shareholder, you're going to get paid out. The time period between the entry of the contract and the closing date is what many call due diligence. It's the time where both companies begin to do their due diligence. They try to find out where there's any redundancies, where you have in the acquisition sub company, maybe they have an accountant, and then in the Twitter company they have the accountant that does the exact same thing. They're going to be looking for those redundancies so that they can eliminate whatever they need to eliminate that they don't need. And so in order to accomplish that, you have to do due diligence. You also have to make sure that there aren't any pending lawsuits. You've got to make sure that there's no surprises that could affect the sale and bring the company value below what your expectation was. And so there's provisions like on page 22 that prior to the closing, company will provide parent with correct and complete lists as of such date of all outstanding company equity awards, including the holder, type of company equity award, date of grant, number of shares, and all those things. So in other words, Elon Musk is going to be entitled to know how many outstanding shares there are, who they belong to, what the values of them are, so that way there's no surprises as to what the outstanding shares are and what their value should be. What are the things that you look for when you're purchasing a company? Well, one of the things is you want to know whether the company has any outstanding debt. And they address that in this agreement on page 26. It says under section 4.10, no undisclosed liabilities except as reflected, disclosed, or reserved. As amended, there are no liabilities or obligations that haven't been disclosed or that will not be disclosed. So one of the things is debt. If you find out that the company has some hidden debt that you weren't aware of, then obviously that may change the negotiation and perhaps may give a right to not close. Another thing that you want to look at is if there's any pending litigation. Is the company that you're trying to buy involved in any lawsuits? Are they being sued for any negligence or for any breach of fiduciary duty or anything like that? is there a pending lawsuit? And on page 26 in the next section it says there is no suit, action, or proceeding pending or to the knowledge of the company that would have a company material adverse effect. So it doesn't mean that there aren't any lawsuits. What it does mean is that even if there are any, it doesn't have a material adverse effect. Of course, one of the biggest expenses with a business is your employees and the executives and how their pay structure is and their company benefits. So you're going to want to know how much are they paid, how often are they paid, in what ways are they paid, what about retirement, what about benefits, stock options, 401ks, all of the things that the company provides. You're going to want to have a list of all those things, and that's addressed in here as well. Another thing that is addressed is labor matters. So if they're in a state, because Twitter is obviously a large company that covers multiple areas of the country. Maybe they're in a state that has requires a collective bargaining agreement, some sort of union protections. You're going to want to know, if you're buying a company, if it is a company that is subject to a collective bargaining agreement or a union, because you may decide, hey, I don't want to have to deal with that. That may cause some impact on my profits, so I need to back out of that. But in this provision, it says that in the event that they are in a position where there's a collective bargaining agreement, that they will, prior to closing, disclose all of that information as well. So that way Elon Musk will be able to make that determination. Of course, another big thing when you're buying a business is its intellectual property rights, your trademarks, your copyrights, your websites, your SEO. All of those things are very valuable to a business. And so you want to make sure that there are no copyright claims, trademark, patent infringement claims, and that company is in fact the owner of the sole owner of those trademarks and of that intellectual property. So you want to make sure that they are able to provide that documentation and get some sort of verification that there is no pending litigation as to those trademarks. And that's addressed on page 28. It says the company has exclusively own all patents, trademarks, trade names, copyrights, internet domain names, service marks, trade secrets, and other intellectual property rights. You definitely don't want to buy a business that the IRS is mad at, so you want to make sure that they have properly filed their business taxes and that they are taking steps in the current year to make sure that the taxes are done correctly, and that provision is addressed in here as well. Another thing you want to look at is if there are any contracts. What are the contracts that are involved with the business? And then are there any claims that the company has breached those contracts, or any claims that company has against other companies that they might have breached the contract, so that you would need to enforce those once you take control of the company. All of that needs to be included in the due diligence as well. And since this is a merger, some of those same provisions are going to apply to Elon Musk companies as applies to the Twitter company. Like on page 36, they agree that there's no suit pending against the parent company, which is Elon Musk's X Holdings 1. And then in section 5.9, they have an agreement that they are solvent. Neither parent nor acquisition sub is entering the agreement with the intent to hinder, delay, or defraud either the present or future creditors of the company or any of its subsidiaries. Parent is solvent. In other words, they have the money and the financing that shows that they are not that they have a net worth. They are not negative net worth. They are a positive net worth as companies. Now, one of the things that Twitter is agreeing to is that while the sale is pending, that they agree to use reasonable efforts to preserve substantially intact the material components of its current business organization, and to preserve in all material respects its present relationships with key customers, suppliers, and other persons. So when you're buying a business, you want to make sure that while the sale is pending, that the company that you're buying is going to continue working in an appropriate manner. They're not going to just basically say, well, we're going to lose our jobs anyway, or, we don't want to work for this other person, so we're basically just going to sit on our hands and do nothing, and we don't care about our relationships with vendors and other things. You want to make sure that that's spelled out in the agreement, that the company that you're buying agrees to use reasonable efforts to keep the business going until you reach the close, because you want the value to remain consistent. So make sure that that's a material part of your due diligence and also as part of your agreement, so that way you have that protection in the event that you're trying to buy a business. On page 43 is a very important provision relating to due diligence. When you are buying a business, you don't just take their word for it. You need to inspect the properties, you need to inspect the books, you need to inspect the financial reports and records, and that's addressed here on page 43. It says that they agree to give the parent company reasonable access in a manner not disruptive in any material respect during normal business hours and upon written notice. And they can get access to the properties, books, and records of the company and its subsidiaries, and during such period shall furnish promptly all information concerning the business, properties, and personnel as may reasonably be requested in writing. So they have a right to inspect all those things, and that's what any smart person would want to do in a purchase or merger. Now here's an interesting provision on page 44. The company agrees not to solicit other bids. Now there's another provision in here that says that they may still receive competing bids, but they cannot solicit them. Like if somebody were to just on their own decide, hey, I want to try to, one up Elon Musk, and then they try to make a bid, there's no violation there. But it is a violation for Twitter to try to get other bids. On page 52 is a provision about financing. And one of the things that I just want to point out is that one of the agreements that Musk is making is that on or prior to the closing date, transferring Tesla shares to the margin loan borrower, which is essentially another company that Musk is creating to serve as a loan company. He is to transfer, or he may need to transfer Tesla shares to the margin loan borrower, and causing the margin loan borrower to credit to collateral accounts pledged. So in other words, the Tesla shares are serving as collateral, or may be serving as collateral if that's a necessary thing in order for him to obtain the financing. So maybe that's one of the reasons why the Tesla shares are under such pressure. Demonstrating the fact that the company is going to be private, there's a provision on page 59 that says that the parent shall take or cause to be taken all actions to cause the company's securities to be delisted with the New York Stock Exchange and deregistered under the Exchange Act. So it is definitely going private. And now the $1 billion page. On page 61 it says, if the merger shall not have been consummated on or before 5 p.m. on October 24th, 2022. So that's currently the idea of the closing date is October 24th, 2022. And it does say that it could be extended an additional 6 months under some conditions. But in the event that either of the parties cause the agreement to be terminated, they have to pay a termination fee. And that goes back to the definition that if for some reason Musk isn't able to get financing and the deal is terminated, he has to pay $1 billion termination fee. If for any reason the company accepts another bid from another company and terminates the agreement with Musk, they will have to pay $1 billion. So it's likely that they are going to complete this deal unless somebody comes in and offers an amount large enough that would basically make up for Twitter having to pay that $1 billion termination fee. So I don't expect that this deal is going to fall apart, but I mean, stranger things have happened. So anyway, those are the kind of things that you're going to want to think about if you're trying to start a business, and hopefully this gives you some more insight into how the actual operation of this merger between Elon Musk's parent and acquisition sub company and Twitter is actually going to work. So this is going to take some time. It's going to be at least till October 24th. And may even take longer. There are other provisions in there. Someone's already done a story today, I think, that Elon Musk might have violated a provision in there regarding, he can tweet, but that it can't be disparaging. And I'll keep my eye out on that. And if I think that's something interesting, then I'll bring that to your attention. But hope you found this video helpful. Again, my name is Drew Page. If you will, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the notification bell, and until next time, stay tuned.